as a young child, wide-eyed in fascination, watching The Karate Kid in my living room, I didn't know that there would be a scene, the Dragon Well scene, that would not only captivate my imagination, but also become a source of inspiration. In the Dragon Well scene, Dre Parker and Mr. Han travel to the top of Mount Wudang. There, the Dragon Well was introduced, displayed as this giant fountain with a big yin-yang symbol inscribed in the middle of it. Now, the Dragon Well is what gave Mr. Han his magical kung fu powers, so he made Dre drink out of it. Watching this movie inspired me not only from a moral and philosophical standpoint, but also for my future career aspirations. That day was the day. I wanted to become a ninja. Something about the simultaneous elegance and strength of ninjas captivated my young mind. I wanted to run in the shadows, conceal my presence, and surprise attack the enemies. So at the time, I thought about the 4 things I needed to become a ninja: speed, strength, silence, and most importantly, an awesome costume. I already knew I had an amazing costume from that year's Halloween, so all I needed to do was master the other 3. Light work. So naturally, with my competitive spirit in mind, I challenged the 5 fastest boys in my class to a race, and I ended up dead last. To see how strong I was, I gave myself the task of doing 10 pull-ups. Not a single one was done. And to top it all off, my parents were complaining about how loud I was being, how I kept dragging my feet along the pavement, and how I kept rambling on about how cool ninjas were. It's safe to say, at the end of the day, my dreams of ninjahood came to an end. But that was when a new dream began. I became a different type of fighter, a boxer. The journey to being a boxer is no joke. It's one of the hardest things someone can do. My brother, a former boxer and my current coach, taught me how to fight in the living room of our small apartment. He taught me the very first step before learning how to punch like Tyson or how to dodge like Muhammad Ali is to learn how to get punched in the face. Now, no one wants to get punched in the face, risk the shiner, and the broken nose too. But in order to be successful in my newfound passion, I knew I had to train myself to not be afraid. So my brother would throw his punches so that they would stay just out of reach. But my fight or flight kicked in, and needless to say, flight won. I would always flinch with the fear of getting rocked. After a week of trying, I told my brother, and he told me about all of the times he wanted to quit. All the times the greatest athletes were on the brink of admitting defeat, but stuck with it. He taught me that boxing is a sport where you have to love getting hit in the face, taking the shiner, and the broken nose too. From there, I learned to welcome the negatives of the sport. Fighting has been a big part of my life since then. Learning how to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. I got good. I got stronger, faster, and I learned to fight. Maybe I would revisit my ninja dreams, but that requires an expanded skill set. So years later, I picked up the art of wrestling, which would make me both stronger physically and mentally. At a wrestling camp I attended last summer, our coach, Phil, talked about the mind's role in a seemingly very hands-on discipline. He emphasized the symbol of yin-yang. Now, how could a symbol in which I saw in the Dragon Well scene 8 years ago relate to the sport of wrestling? The yin-yang itself is a circle divided into 2 halves, one filled with black, yin, and the other filled with white, yang, each half containing a small circle of the opposite color. He taught me how every aspect of the yin-yang symbolizes something. Number 1, the yin-yang are opposites, yet they are interdependent and connected to each other. One cannot exist without the other, as exemplified by the wholeness of the circle. Number 2, the yin-yang illustrates the concept of balance and harmony, where one force isn't completely overpowering the other, as seen by the equally distributed parts of black and white. And finally, the yin-yang represents the idea, or the black and white circles of the yin-yang represents the idea that each force contains the seed of another. I thought to myself, how could this philosophy relate to wrestling? My world changed when my coach taught us that just as the yin-yang are opposites, so are you and your opponent. Sometimes you may hate your opponent because they're preventing you from your goal, which is winning. In my experience with anything involving an opponent, I'm taught to hate my opponent because they're preventing me from my goal, and also that hate will fuel me into triumphing over them. But my coach taught us that you need to love the wrestler, and that you need to love your opponent, because without them, there is no sport of wrestling. He related the balance of yin-yang to offense and defense, where every offensive move has an actionable defensive counter. So how can we relate this philosophy to our own lives? It took me a long time. I mean, why would I even like my opponent, let alone love them? It took me several hours of meditation, reflection, and a couple of reruns of The Karate Kid to even grasp this idea. Let's take this step by step. We can take the first concept, that the yin-yang are opposites, yet they are interdependent and connected with each other. If something unfortunate has happened in our lives, we need to understand that the bad things life throws at us is what gives us a challenge. It's what gives us meaning to our lives. Without challenges and hardships, life would be dull and monotonous. Our concept of good and evil would never be fulfilled without pain and suffering. Our appreciation of the good things in life is reliant on the way we approach evil. If we choose to reject it and ignore it, then our concept of good would never be fulfilled. On the other hand, if we choose to open it in wide, welcoming arms, then our concept of good and life as well will be fulfilled. We need to add the flavor of chaos into our lives and develop that acquired taste for it. We can take the second concept, that the yin-yang illustrates the concept of balance and harmony, where one force isn't completely overpowering the other. We can apply this to our mental state in lives as we approach life-changing events. We always think that everything needs to go perfectly. I might be dead focused on acing my test and expecting nothing less than 100. Or I might be focused on pinning my opponent in the very first period. Relating our mindsets back to the yin-yang, one force cannot completely dominate the other without ruining the bigger whole. Let's take a step back and visualize our lives as this yin-yang symbol. If we had our lives full of joy, growth, and prosperity, then we wouldn't have a yin-yang symbol at all. On the other hand, if we had our lives filled with chaos, then our entire yin-yang circle would be black. We need to add just the right amount of chaos into our lives, and it'll add that whole new dimension of flavor and humanity. I get it. Everyone wants to get a perfect score on a test. Was it really worth all the stress and hours of sleep lost? A wrestling match that can turn to complete domination from one side, to a nail-biter where both teams are cheering as loud as possible. Just the right amount of chaos needs to be added into our lives. Having too much chaos in our lives will eventually break us down. Learning how to find the good in the bad and bad in the good allows us to become a more beautiful whole, a symbol of complete harmony. As I've learned throughout my life, the yin-yang can teach us profound lessons about life, balance, and the indomitable spirit within us. Thank you.